What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I'm going to be discussing the 10 reasons to play Deadpool Destroy. In this video, we're going to look at a bunch of conquest clips, but I've been playing this deck all season. I used it to climb to Infinite and climb up the Infinite ladder. I am currently in the top 1,000 players in the world and top 300 in America at the time of this recording. But we are kicking things off in a Proving Grounds match in Conquest. We're going to look at a bunch of Conquest clips throughout this video, but that is why we are starting things off with a double snap, but we've got a really good hand, which brings me to reason number one. And that's just Deadpool, baby. Deadpool was one of the first Series 3 cards that I personally unlocked in Marvel Snap, and it's been a favorite of mine ever since. I really love the card. It's just awesome. I love the Deadpool movies as well, but I just think it just does some really cool stuff in Marvel Snap, and that's what this game is gonna be able to showcase as well. We've got Aunt May's plus Forge, so we get to start this game off with a 6-power Deadpool. I should also mention I am playing the Hulkbuster version of this deck, which is another great way to grab yourself a 6-power Deadpool. But there are other different builds of the deck that I've seen people play. This is the one that I happen to like. And right now I should talk about reason number two. And it's going to sound a little bit backwards, but reason number two that I really like Deadpool right now, and the reason that I started playing the deck, is because of Caiera. Now, in this game, Rickety Bridge is going to blow up my opponent's Nebula unless they play a Caiera this turn. But we've got priority, and Caiera basically means like three things. One, it means that people are playing less armor. It means people are playing less armor and more Caiera to try to protect their one-cost cards, and you can exploit this with a deck that is playing Killmonger, and this is a really good deck that is playing Killmonger. Because of Caiera, people are also just playing more one-cost cards. People before weren't really relying on armor as much. They were just saying, okay, I'm not even gonna play Nebula. I'm not gonna bother. We missed with our Hulkbuster here, but we're still gonna grab ourselves a pretty big Deadpool as a result of this, so not too shabby. And then the third reason, like alongside the Caiera line of logic, is sometimes your opponent will be playing Caiera and they just won't draw it, or they won't draw it soon enough, or like in this case, they don't have priority on turn 3, so there is no soon enough. There is just no opportunity for them to be able to draw it. My opponent might have wanted to use magic here to turn off Rickety Bridge, so that way we couldn't keep using it. Point number 3 is going to be Knull. And X23, which isn't really coming up super important in this game. This is just like a big high roll game. We've got a whole bunch of extra energy in this one because of Limbo, and then because we destroyed X23 multiple times on the final turn. But typically, you will be able to use the extra energy from X23 to play both Deadpool and Knull on the final turn in a 6-turn game, which is pretty fantastic. And if your opponents happen to be playing Limbo, playing Magic, then you don't even need X23 because your opponent gives you that extra turn for free. And this deck is a pretty good turn 7 deck as well, despite not actually playing Magic itself. I think that Magic is potentially a card that you could play in this deck. You could definitely justify that. But the fourth point that I want to bring up is fun. This is just a fun game. This is a very, very fun deck, and believe it or not, that is actually a pretty important thing in Marvel Snap. I decided that I wanted to get onto the leaderboards this season, and in order to do that, you've got to play a ton of games of Marvel Snap. So I was looking at decks and I was trying to figure out what's a deck that I could realistically play like over 100 games with and not get bored. And Deadpool Destroy is the answer to that deck. On the subject of fun, I do also want to bring up the different card choices that you can play in this list. If you take a look at the deck list on the other side of the screen here, most Destroy lists are playing this exact same deck, with like one or maybe two changes. Hulkbuster is the flex card. You'll either see, actually most people aren't running Hulkbuster. I personally like it, most people are either running in that slot Taskmaster or Arnim Zola. And those are also combos with Knull and Deadpool in their own ways and can definitely be really fun and really powerful. I went with Hulkbuster because I felt like it was the most consistent, but then sometimes people also cut Deathlok, and then the other thing that you'll see instead of those like high-rolly cards is some tech cards. Shang-Chi, Enchantress, Rogue, potentially Mobius, and then Alioth is another one that people have started to tech in recently. But this is the list that I like. I think it's pretty straight across the board. Not playing any tech myself means that I'm just not relying on my opponents at all. I'm just saying I'm going to try to do the best thing. With a lot of the locations that come up in the game, it is possible to just do the best thing while playing Deadpool Destroy. We're going to talk about locations in just a moment. This game's pretty silly because of Elysium here from Legion, but it's also very, very silly because I have Galactus and realized I could kind of do a surprise Galactus play if I really wanted to by using Killmonger to destroy X-23 and then play Galactus. I'm making an additional copy of Deadpool with my Nico just in case this Galactus plan doesn't work out, but it's 1 in 3 to be able to activate here as long as X-23 doesn't land back in that Elysium Prime, that first location there, and it doesn't, so we are going to get a Galactus game, which is pretty spicy, pretty fun, which again is reason number 4. It's just a fun deck, and yeah, if the deck wasn't fun, if there were ways to, like the high roll, the crazy highs from the high roll moments give you the fuel to queue up and play 7 more games even after you lose an 8-cuber. So I do think that that is super important. This was really just a silly one here, and you'll see it gets even sillier on the final turn because my opponent plays Taskmaster plus a Titania, and it's actually a tie. So no cubes exchanged here. Locations. Let's talk about locations. There's some really, really fantastic locations when you are playing a Destroy deck. Some locations are so good that you can have 2 terrible locations because they just carry you. In this game, my opponent already knows that I'm on Destroy, so when they see Collapsed Mine pop up, I'm snapping, they're frowning, and I'm getting a free death out of the deal. So pretty good start. Death is now free. Our second location is Wakanda though, which is not a good location for this deck. And that's actually gonna make things a little bit tricky, and we'll see in just a moment why my opponent decided to stay in this one. But I still have a pretty reasonable hand here with X-23 and Nico and Carnage and Wolverine and a free death here too. But my opponent has armor, which is why they stayed in despite the snap. So now armor plus Wakanda, it's not actually looking that great for me, and things get a little bit awkward here too with the Bifrost, which now means that everything is going to move into an armor or Wakandan location. So kind of awkward, and there's no real way around that. However, I do get to make a nice play here and grab an additional copy of this free death with my Nico. So that was nice, and sequence that as a little bit of a surprise there for my opponent, plus allowed me to see what the third location was. Use Deathlok to blow up X-23, and then I will just blow up these things a few more times here. But this is like not a horrible game, despite 2 of the locations being armored. I would still say like this is a pretty good spot for me to be in as a Destroy player from here. So we are probably, actually no, we get some lucky flips, reasonably lucky flips there that we don't fill up the Bifrost. My opponent waves, but it's really nice that the Bifrost isn't full up. I forget what my opponent is playing at this point. Here I decide to play Venom plus Death. The reason for that is if I draw Knull next turn, I want to be able to play it, and the fact that Venom is bigger than my opponent's Giganto is pretty awesome. So my opponent is going to retreat with that one for 2 cubes, but there is one more thing that I wanted to say about locations, and that is the fact that when this video goes live, it might come live a little bit earlier on Sunday than the daily rollover, but Sunday's featured location, I believe, is going to be Altar of Death. So I just wanted to talk about featured locations on that point specifically because Altar of Death is obviously a really good location for this deck, but proceed with caution. So there's a difference between Altar of Death just in general, and Altar of Death is a featured location when everyone knows Altar of Death is a featured location. Sorry. It's just people might be more likely to play hate cards. People might be more likely to play armor on a day where Altar of Death is the featured location. And awkwardly, my opponent here does not go for the armor into Altar of Death. They play it in Avengers Compound, which is, yeah, makes you kind of raise a little bit of a finger there. It means that whatever I want to set up for turn 5 is not going to be possible. But there's still going to be a lot of possibilities for things to do here, and there's just a lot of possibilities because I've got 6 energy this turn, which is pretty fantastic. So I'm going to go for Hulkbuster plus the Venom into Nidavellir, sets me up for some nice power in that location, and then still have the potential to do some nice stuff with Altar of Death and potentially making a free death on some later turns. And we'll just let this game play out here because it is the end of this conquest clip, but I'll start to talk about the next point, I guess, a little bit. The next point is really like all of the points that I have to make, and that's just that the deck is strong. It sounds like a little bit silly, and I'm going to get into some nuance of the deck being strong as we go on through the rest of the video, but also, like, that's kind of it. It's just a strong deck, and I think that I personally wasn't really respecting the deck that much and did not realize how it's strong because the deck has not had any changes to it in a while. Forge became a 1-cost card. That definitely helped. Hulkbuster got a little bit more power. I think it used to be a 3/4. For the most part, though, the rest of the deck is the same. And the big things that I feel like make the deck strong aren't really Forge or the additional power of Hulkbuster. Most people aren't even playing Hulkbuster, but it's X23, and it's Nico. Nico just does so much. I don't get to utilize it this game because I'm only allowed to play 2 Avengers Compound, and my opponent used Magneto to fill that location up, so definitely makes sense as far as why they snapped and set up that particular line of play. I'm just going to play Death into Avengers Compound, and then I will battle for Nidavellir and Altar of Death next turn. One other huge reason that I would be remiss to mention as Marvel Snap's top free-to-play player is this deck is pretty cheap to put together. And for me personally, what that means is I'm looking for a deck that I can play at the highest levels with no substitutions in it. And specifically, that means season pass cards. Scar is the current season pass card, so obviously I don't have that. But Miss Marvel has also yet to be featured in Spotlight caches, so I also don't have her. And she goes in a lot of decks, so I didn't just want to play like a worse version of a top deck without Miss Marvel, and Destroy was a deck that I found I could play without any season pass cards. But for everyone else, this is still a really cheap deck, and especially cheap when you consider all of the other points that I've brought up throughout this video, just in how strong it is, how fun it is, etc. The deck only has 1 Series 4 card, that's Knull, which I obviously already said is really great. Knull is also one of the longest lasting Series 4 cards. It will probably stay Series 4 for a while to come, so that kind of makes it a reasonable investment as well. And then the 1 Series 5 card is Nico Minoru, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the video, but is just absolutely a fantastic card and probably worth your tokens and spotlight keys regardless. So I pulled up this image here on Marvel Snap Zone because I knew that they did breakdowns about decks as far as the pool distribution. So imagine my surprise when I load up this image and Den has put Scar as the final card in the list, which now means I guess the deck has 2 pool 5 cards. I really was not expecting that, and it definitely can get played in here as an additional Series 5 card if you have bought the season pass for this season. There's definitely some synergies with Scar and with this strategy, but it was just funny that I found this out as I was looking this up to make the point about not having to make substitutions to play this list. I don't think Scar is super necessary. So obviously I haven't played with Scar, so I can't really speak on it one way or another. My hunch is that it potentially makes the deck more consistent across the board. There are definitely moments where you could high roll or low roll with Scar, but comparing it to Hulkbuster, which I said is kind of like the more consistent cousin of Taskmaster and Arnim Zola, I think that Scar is potentially even more consistent, which is why it's probably a great recommendation for the list. Though Scar won't get you out of jams in the same way that a Hulkbuster can, and it can't pop off in the same way that a Hulkbuster can. So Scar in some ways is kind of a win more, because if you're not doing anything, then neither is Scar. So I don't know. I think I still for now like Hulkbuster, but maybe I will give Scar a shot once it's available in Spotlight caches. It really is just a super powerful deck. It's powerful enough that I'm able to come back from this 8-cube loss here against a Cerebro 3 list, and I just fire off win after win against this deck. I will potentially fast forward through some of this, but I'll also talk about some other points that I want to make. So one point, and I've seen some discussion around this on Twitter recently, is that Destroy is a great deck while other people are kind of trying to figure out what to play. By the way, Sinister London, another fabulous location for this deck. Someone tweeted recently, like, does anyone have a list of all of the locations that are synergistic with Destroy? And I was playing Destroy at the time. I responded, I could sooner get you a list of locations that are not synergistic with Destroy. There's just so many good locations with this deck. So yeah, it's fantastic for that reason, but it's also just strong when there's shifts in the meta, because people are like trying to figure out new stuff, and there's two things that happen when there's a shift in the meta. That is, one, players are kind of playing suboptimal lists that aren't totally finely tuned, and Destroy is pretty finely tuned, like I said, with only 1 or 2 different changes that different players will make across the deck. And the other thing with that is people are going to experiment. And Marvel Snap is a game where there's a changing meta at least once a week. Every week a new card comes out and people want to try out the new card, and just playing Destroy, just playing a solid across the board deck. People are playing Meek, or Mike, whatever it's called. We're going to look at that in the next clip actually. But it's like, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to play Destroy. I've got Killmonger in your deck. Nice Mike, bro. And it's, yeah, just kind of embarrassing for anybody not playing Destroy. So it can feel a little bit samey, like I get that. But I think there's definitely some credit to just playing a good, consistent deck over and over again. At some point, some nerfs might come for Destroy. Destroy is really popular right now at the time of recording this. A lot of people are talking about it on Twitter. I've been playing it literally since the beginning of this season as my main deck, and it's been strong throughout the entire season, and honestly probably even before that, because it's just a consistent deck. So I think that is, even though I'm kind of rambling here, I think a really important point to talk about, because Marvel Snap is actually a game where the meta is always changing. Once a week there's a new card. Twice a week there is a featured location. Once a week typically there is an OTA or a patch. That's 4 days of the 7 days in a week. That's more than half of the time that you spend playing Marvel Snap. The meta is in a constant state of flux. So playing a Destroy deck just allows you to be really consistent. Now, I've actually personally been in a, this is never something that I've done before, but because I've been climbing for the global leaderboard position, I've actually been playing my Conquest games on featured location days, and I have been playing Destroy on non-featured location days. That might change today with Altar of Death, but I'm not sure, because like I said, Altar of Death could mean more people bringing more hate for Altar of Death. Maybe I'll brew up something fun for the featured location as well. But yeah, just want to get that point across, that like the meta is always changing and Destroy is always constant. So Deadpool, Wolverine, literally like their superpower is those cards aren't going anywhere. And this is like a kind of like a silly way to think about it, but like we've got Deadpool 3 on the horizon. Those cards are going to be playable when Deadpool 3 comes out. There might even be some new toys for the deck when that deck drops. But regardless of like what happens in the future, I think that this is a great deck here and now. I think I'm just gonna skip through the rest of this clip. I don't know if anything else fun happens. Yeah, my opponent uses a Valkyrie, but I played out a Knull, so that ain't gonna work. And then Knull into Onslaught Citadel. So there you go. Just some more awesome locations. Plus we have Limbo for my opponent's Magic, so I'll get to play Knull on the final turn no matter what happens. And then we get one more game here. This game actually reminded me of another point that I can bring up as well, which I kind of touched on, but just to highlight Nico. Nico is a really, really great card in Marvel Snap in general, and it's really great in this deck, but in particular, a deck that like relies on drawing specific combo pieces, namely Deadpool and Knull, is really good with Nico because it basically allows you to draw your entire deck. And in games with Magic, you do just get to draw your entire deck, but then you're also like interested in the Forge ability as well out of Nico, and occasionally you can make use of the ×2 ability and then just like blow it. You can forge your Nico and then multiply it ×2, so it's 8 that then later gets factored on into a Killmonger or even a Venom, and also Knull gets to take advantage of. So Nico's just really strong. Just kind of wanted to talk about Nico as we're able to use it to draw 2 cards here. The other point that I wanted to make as far as the deck being strong is with the fact that Blob was nerfed. This deck can now make bigger cards than Blob, which I do think is pretty relevant and feels a lot more fair. I will probably have a video coming out eventually on like nerfed Blob and then show some fun moments where this deck was able to make cards bigger than Blob, just because that's fun. But I've got a lot of sweet clips with this deck, and that's kind of point number 10. I think maybe it's point number 11 now that I threw in that Nico point here. We'll call it point number 11 just so that way it is a bonus one here. And that is just going to be that this deck has got me to Infinite this season. It put me at the top 100 on the leaderboard, top 300 in America. It's got me multiple Infinity tickets. This is the 3rd game of a gold conquest, by the way, and we're gonna not actually gonna play the Knull this game, even though we did find it. I'm gonna play for the Cerebro math in every location. So on the side locations, I'm gonna play for 14 and just beat 2 Cerebro cards, and then center, I'm gonna make my power go up to 8, so that way I beat them if they move Jeff out. That's what seemed the smartest play for me to do, and it is ultimately going to work out here as my opponent moves the Jeff into Sokovia and plays 1 other card. I am going to lose in the big house against my opponent though, but then they will, oh no, actually I do beat them in big house as well, because I think their final card is just a Wasp over in big house. But Mobius plus Jeff, I'll beat that, and I will beat the Wasp as well for a cosmic victory that will also earn me an Infinity ticket. And all of that is to say, if you want to see more Deadpool Destroy content, hit that subscribe button. I've recorded all of my games that got me to Infinite and that got me up to top 1,000 on the Infinite leaderboard, so that's going to be a video that I've got coming out soon. I just realized I made a mistake. This was actually the Infinity ticket game, so this one was game 3 of a gold conquest, got me an Infinity ticket here. The one that we were just looking at against Cerebro 3, that was actually game 2 of a different gold conquest. So now we can see how game 3 of this gold conquest shook out, and my opponent playing some random discard shenanigans. I'm just playing good solid Deadpool Destroy, and ultimately that will put me out on top here, despite them making like a pretty good showing of it. Killmonger able to destroy Mike. I think I might have brought that up earlier in the video, and that got me my 2nd Infinity ticket with this deck. But if you want to see more, like I said, hit that subscribe button. I've got a bunch of sweet highlight clips to share, but today I just wanted to talk about these Infinity ticket games. I think that they lined up well for the talking points that I had, but for today, that's going to be it. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.